So you talked about the difference between a game and a sport, and I'm curious why that aspect, aside from, say, in terms of distracting someone from the movements that they're actually making, in because they're lost in the game in the flow state or whatever you want to call it, that what is it that neurologically do you think is useful about the gamified aspect of this in terms of neuroplasticity and recovery? What is the game providing us?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and we always get asked that. I think it's actually multifactorial. In other words, first, I think you need to do something which is beautiful, social, and emotional. In other words, it makes a difference if you're doing something that has that aesthetic and social quality, right? It's not that inspiring if you're a patient to be working in a sort of on linoleum and white walls and rubber mats and balls. It all feels very institutional, almost prison-like, right? It's not exactly uplifting. So you want something that is, what I always say is, if you're going to be sick, you might as well enjoy it, right? So it's the unbelievable lack of taste that is so prevalent in medical environments, right? We somehow feel like if you're ill, you don't have high aesthetic requirements. I mean, it's terrible. It's almost like a form of Puritanism. We also know from a lot of work that if you're in a rewarded environment and you're enjoying yourself and you have motivation, that you actually get better bang for your buck per trial of practice. Right? I mean, there's a lot of work showing that you actually make a more skilled movement if you're rewarded at a target than if you just reach for the target without the reward. It's quite profound, actually. So motivation and reward in the form of points or just sheer endogenous enjoyment improve the quality of practice. Finally, you want people to make movements where the practice is on the, as I said before, the capacities, the building blocks of movement, rather than on a particular task. Because what we've learned about motor learning of tasks is it suffers from what's called the curse of task specificity. You learn how to be good at that, and it doesn't generalize. Whereas if you learn capacities, you can recombine them for many tasks. Right? So you want a game that is a non-task-based task.
A non-task-based task.
And also we know that the combination of cognitive challenge and movement is very valuable. You're not just repeating movements, you're having to solve the problem each time. So that's a big part of it. And also we know that physical activity, in other words, cardiovascular challenge and high amplitude movements are actually beneficial as well. Right? So you need to, it's for all those reasons, you want to do something immersive and multimodal and non-task based.
So how much do you think there's the possibility, say, in the future to tailor the games to the patient? How much difference do you think it makes as to what the game is, or what is the task that you're performing in incentivizing patients to
yeah, no, that's another very good question, right? In other words, I think when people ask me this question, I always try and make people realize that you need to be able to be comfortable with the fact that there are general universals and particulars. Okay, let's take language, right? You may have a friend who speaks French and somebody else who speaks German, and French and German are very different. But fundamentally, they're not at all different as far as the brain is concerned, right? They, as Chomsky has pointed out, they have a universality to their grammatical structure. Okay. So using that example, you could say that sometimes I want the game to be German, sometimes I want the game to be French, but they're both languages. Right? And actually, Omar Ahmad, one of the inventors, one of the three of us, he always uses a very interesting example, which I think is quite interesting. He says, if you have a stroke where you lose language, the traditional way would be to try and teach, if you're an English speaker, is to try and train you back in English. He says what you should really do is be immersed in Chinese.
Right.
Because there you're going to have to practice the capacity of acquiring a language in general versus the English that you already had in its particulars. So he likes to say our immersive environment is like an English speaker being made to recover in Chinese, right? Because it might actually promote a more general recovery. Okay. So the general idea is any nervous system disease, whether it's dementia, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, or stroke, will benefit from a holistic, enriched environment with practice, right? Now, obviously, if you have a spinal cord lesion and it's your legs, or you have a stroke and it's your arm, or it's not motor at all, it's just cognitive because you have early Alzheimer's, obviously we will change some aspects of what you need to control. We may change the creature, we may change the challenge, but the basic idea of something beautiful and creature-based and exploratory that combines exercise, movement, and thinking will always be there. But we've created more than a dolphin. We have a killer whale, we've made a little dragon, we've made jellyfish. So in other words, we're working on hummingbirds. So in other words, it's very His Dark Materials like.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And think about His Dark Materials, right? The concept is universal, but each person's creature might be different. So it's that combination of the fundamental principles that are invariant and then the particulars that you will tailor to the patient, to the body part, to the cognitive deficit.
It's especially like the children sort of changeable demons in early on as they have to, learn a lot.
Exactly.
Figure themselves
right.
out. I like that. I like that comparison a lot. So what do you think do you think there are limits on what we can retrain the brain to do in what kinds of repair is possible?
Absolutely. Yes. In other words, I think that we're going to have to complement this very holistic behavioral platform and approach with more, my guess, will be invasive, device-based pharmacological approaches. But the nervous system is such that all those secondary things, whether it's an implantable electrode, whether you infuse stem cells into someone, whether you give them a drug, whether you brain stimulate non-invasively, none of those things will work unless they're multiplied on a very high intensity, high dose, enjoyable behavioral cardiovascular experience. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely don't think that alone will solve everything, right? You're not going to behave your way out of Parkinson's disease. Right? You may slow progression, but if you're going to start, doing DBS or giving drugs, I have no doubt in my mind that many of the failed trials with pharmaceuticals for neurological injury and disease is because they were never coupled with the proper behavioral experience. And let me give you an intuition so you understand the point I'm making. If I said to you, Josh, here's a pill, take it tonight, and tomorrow you'll wake up an expert tennis player, you would know that that's nonsense, right? It's just scientifically ill-posed. Right? If I said, here's a pill that would improve the quality of your practice, which you still need to do, maybe it makes you concentrate better. Maybe it energizes you. That would make more sense. Similarly, now we switch over to injury. If I said, here's your injury, take this pill and you'll be better, it's equally silly. But the idea of coupling it with a training paradigm, and for example, there's beautiful work that's been done over the last several years on spinal cord injury, where you do epidural stimulation of the spinal cord in conjunction with very intense treadmill training, both in humans and rodents. That combination works impressively. So I would say get your behavioral platform right first, then the adjuncts will start to work, and we'll need the adjuncts. But what will not work is adjuncts with feeble rehab as usual, which is where we've been.
So you're saying for something like something as extreme even as Elon Musk's Neuralink technology or software, I don't even know what you would call it, hardware, mind control device, for that to succeed in its even initial aims of helping people, improve or regain motor function in legs or from paralysis or brain injuries, that it has to be coupled with some sort of game-based environment.
Right. I mean, I think that, there's an enormous amount of hype around Neuralink, and what Elon Musk and I've actually been interviewed about this several times. But let's say that you take the cases where this notion is most valuable, which is people who have cervical spinal cord injury, or they're locked in, or brainstem strokes, or ALS. Yes, I mean, if you're controlling other objects or your own body, let's say ultimately with EMG, of course you're going to have to practice how to do it. Now, somebody might say that maybe you should just practice in real life what you're doing. My guess is that's just very boring. It's limiting. And to take your implantable electrodes for a spin, it would probably be more fun to do it in a gamified environment that makes you try the full repertoire of your potential capacities rather than just doing boring everyday tasks. Ultimately, of course, you'd graduate from that immersive environment to real life tasks. But my intuition is to get the intensity and doses needed, you should transition through this intermediate immersive stage. That's my guess.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.